Greetings, cartoon fans and honest citizens everywhere. It's another Saturday morning and thus another session with Middle Aged Cartoonist. Today is Saturday morning. It's a sunny day here on our undisclosed cartoon location. And Saturday mornings are a good day for maintenance work. I just printed some more copies of one of my recent comic books. You can see some of the pages here. My camera strap's getting in the way. This is how they come from the printer. I use their self-service equipment. Notice there is a white margin around the edge. So one of the last steps of putting a book together is what I call bordering, where firstly you make the white margin dark with a double black line all around, as you see on these pages here. And then you color it in with a complementary color for the rest of the page. This comic book was relatively recent, as was this one. Saturday morning is a good time to get out older comic books done several years ago and do what I call reconditioning. What that is where you draw right over the original artwork of the original masters and add color, add shading, and bring the skill level up to where you are currently. This book is a collection of vignettes of my flagship character, the mighty EnergyGirl. A vignette being a sequential art story that is too short to be a comic book in its own right. So we finally gathered them together in this collection. So I thought we'd just page through quickly and look at them, and most of them have been reconditioned. I've been spending the last few days working on this particular book, but you'll see a few toward the beginning that are still in their original state pretty much. We've talked before about the importance of having a title page. This is to introduce new readers to your character. It should never be more than one page, where you have a couple pictures and some text to tell them just enough of what they need to know about the character's backstory to understand what's going on in the pages that follow. Because this is a collection of vignettes, we also have this page, a second title page, which largely introduces the vignettes and tells what a vignette is. This was the very first vignette. It was done in July of 2005. It's called Afraid to Fly. EnergyGirl runs into a gang of bad guys at the airport as she is investigating a guy who is trying to flee the country for some reason. The bad guys try to stop her. They don't succeed, of course. But then the big boss tries to run her over in the very airplane he's trying to escape with. It was just a knee-jerk matter of a defensive measure. She grabs onto the lead wheels, which unfortunately break off, and the plane skids along on its nose until boom. Now, trust me, EnergyGirl would never take a person's life on purpose, but now and then these things do happen. The bad guys reap their rewards. Just like comic books used to do in the 1950s, which is what this story is based on. Here's the second vignette. This is called She Can't Be Contained, or simply Uncontained. It takes place in a container yard. As you can see, here we have a rogue forklift operator who tries to drop a container on Ellen and squish her. Unfortunately, she doesn't squish. So she tells him, "I can give as good as I can get," and then tosses the container at him, deliberately missing him, but largely scares the bejeebies out of him, or whatever the good word is. And here she, now, once again, a big part of her method of operation is intimidation, because she is really a gentle person. She is loath to actually hurt someone, especially someone weaker than her, which is pretty much just about everybody in the town where she lives. But when there are bad guys, she can pick them up and make various subtle threats, hoping they'll spill the beans. And the guy does. He says she wants to know who put him up to trying to kill her with a container. And he says, "Well, I don't know. It was all done over the internet." Number 3. This one is called Mini Mart Maid. Ellen is shopping for milk and eggs and stuff when, unfortunately, there's a robbery. Now, in the universe of the mighty EnergyGirl, it is highly illegal if you are a super person to exercise your superpower in public without wearing a uniform. And this is one of the very few times, it was in the summer, as you can see, shorts, that Ellen is not having a uniform. So the guy is there, he's threatening innocent civilians, and she is torn between whether to respond or whether to obey the law. Well, unfortunately for the guy, this guy says the robbery is done and they want to vamoose, but somehow this guy has been ticked off. And so he decides that he is going to teach the old lady with the milk a lesson and plans to put a bullet in Ellen's head. Well, that makes up Ellen's mind. Meanwhile, outside, husband Stan is waiting in his car saying, "What is taking so long?" When Ellen, still in civilian clothes, emerges, beating the stuffing out of one of the bad guys, and then takes on the other one in this great action shot. Now, highly illegal, once again, no uniform, but when he put the gun on her and was about to pull the trigger, there was nothing else she could do, so too bad for the bad guys. Okay, here's vignette number 4. This is called Movie Madness. It looks like Ellen's in trouble. We got some sort of mad scientist back there, and we got a big bruiser there, and Ellen is about to take a deep breath and issue one of her ear-shattering screams. And the bad guy panics, and that's the evil scientist's girlfriend is called a Moll, M-O-L-L. There she is. Well, the rest of it's not here, but basically then somebody says cut, and you find out it's all a movie, and the last panel, which is not here, shows them all sipping coffee in the employees' lounge and getting ready to go home as the director thanks Ellen for donating her superpowers to making a film without special effects. Here's another similar one about a movie where Ellen is asked to race a train for a movie. Unfortunately, the engineer of the train is a wise guy. Ellen can sprint at about 75 miles an hour. Unfortunately, the engine can do 90. He's been told to keep it under 70. He doesn't. So by the time they get to the crossing, Ellen is running as fast as she can, and she's just a split second too late. So rather than chance knocking the train off the track, she bounces off the side of the train into the weeds. The director is furious. His shot is ruined, and he says, "What kind of so-and-so superhero are you?" Well, never insult a superwoman. Rather than answering verbally, she walks over and grabs the locomotive by its pilot and lifts it off the track as if to say, "This good enough for you, Mac?" Now, this was an original picture. In the actual vignette, I have erased the railroad's road name and paint scheme because that is the property of the Santa Fe Railroad, and it's not mine. It's just Santa Fe is my favorite railroad, so this was an original standalone drawing at one time that was not meant to be part of a vignette, and when I added it in, it needed some changes. And then here we see Ellen from the rear, locomotive still now in one hand, off the track, gesturing to the guys in the camera truck saying, "So I'm not good enough, huh? Well, exactly what do you guys want?" Here we have another one. This is called A Day in the Life. Ellen's in her gym. She gets a little carried away, puts the punching bag right through her wall, when the telephone rings and there's an emergency. The evil Dr. Luke Imierfather has attacked the church where Ellen plays organ part-time and is holding the whole congregation hostage. So rather than go as Ellen, she goes as EnergyGirl. This one was never finished. Presumably she cleans his clock and it ends happily. Now, this one is backwards. This page goes first. Here we see one that is fully reconditioned. This was done about the same time as the other ones, but notice there is flesh color. The colors are brighter. The black is crisper. This one is called Uninsurable. The way it came about was at my day job once there was a bad thunderstorm and I was trapped in the lunchroom waiting for it to let up at the end of the day before I could walk to my car. And I picked up an old newspaper somebody left there, and there was an article that some insurers were concerned about people over 50 because their bones are losing mass, and so they wondered if they should pay higher insurance rates. Well, that got my mind going, and I had some time anyway, so here we have an insurance guy that decides to up the rates of the mighty EnergyGirl because her bone mass is going down because at this time she was 51. Well, she picks him up with one finger and says, "You got a problem with my health, fella?" He decides to leave her rates where they are. I bet you didn't know heroes had insurance. They do. There's a whole story in this one about youth groups and body image, but I think we'll skip it for now. Okay. I told you Ellen was gentle. This is called acting, where she took a lot of guff over her body shape, especially from the evil villain, Dr. Luke Imierfather. He was always insulting her for either being too muscular or too curvy or too whatever. And here she seems to be chewing him out and preparing to take him apart, making all kinds of threats. And then her husband walks in and says, listen, I know you. You would never carry out those threats, and if you're not convincing me, you're never going to convince him. And it turns out she was just play acting in the privacy of her own home. She would never do that type of thing in public. You can't. It's a good way to get fired if you're a superhero. This is called Death on the Freeway, where we have a semi-truck has fallen on a sedan and squashed it flat, and EnergyGirl is called in. She peels the top of the ruined car off, and there inside is a college student, just largely laid out flat but unharmed. This is based on a real incident that I read about in a magazine in the 1960s. It really happened except for the EnergyGirl part. This is called Phone Booth Babe. The old classic where she sees an emergency, walks into a telephone booth in the old days when there were such things, and you know the rest. You know the drill. And it's Dr. Lou Bleimerfader again. Believe it or not, she has a rogues gallery of about half a dozen villains, but he gets used a lot. This is called The Difference Between Superhero Men and Women. We see Stan in a hobby store. He's got a new model locomotive and he's convinced that they have the money to pay for it, but Ellen is chickening out. She's not sure the budget can handle it. Then we see the two. This is back when Stan was going out in uniform with Ellen. We see the two as Cartoonist Man and EnergyGirl, and now they are facing a giant robot off screen. And Stan is chickening out and saying, I think this is more than we can handle, and Ellen is saying, nuts, let's go clean his clock. The point being, different people are afraid of different things. So if you're married, it's always good to consult with your spouse and reach a decision together if you want a moral. Okay, here we have another one. This is called a demonstration. This is a military guy who has hired Ellen to try to put her fist through the new super metal the military is experimenting with. And because they're convinced she can't, they've staged a public demonstration, and the janitor is pointing out who she is while she is quietly preparing herself backstage. Then here we see her delivering the devastating punch. Well, they were both right. She was not able to put her fist through it, but she sure put a dent in it. And then she turns to the general and says, by the way, I heard what you were saying about me a few minutes ago, and I would really appreciate it if you would treat me with more respect. You know, she never forces herself on people, but it never hurts to just make a slight suggestion after you put your fist through, or at least put a dent in, undentable metal. That tends to buy you some credo, even with military people. Okay, this one is called Talk Show Host. This was the original appearance of Jenny Jeffers, who later became a long-time villain from the media in EnergyGirl's life. Stan has retired from being a hero. He now builds model railroads for rich guys, and he's on his way home to find Ellen in her suit leaving. She's been invited to appear on a talk show. And unfortunately, she's been on the talk show twice over the years, and each time the host has made a fool of her in front of millions of people. But Ellen is an optimist, always willing to believe the best in somebody, and she really believes that the host has seen the light and is going to treat her better. And at first they banter back and forth, and it looks like that's true. She's being treated with respect, and the world is learning about who she is and what she does, and then they go to commercial, and when they come back, Jeffers goes in for the kill and makes a fool of Ellen in front of millions of people for the third time. Backstage, this whole thing is to contrast two different, very powerful women that are powerful for different reasons, and no, it's not the one you're thinking, but there's a reason Jenny is built and dressed like this, and yes, it's all fake. Ellen is absolutely real. She is gentle. She is modest. Jenny is everything that she isn't. She's hard-driving. She's ruthless. And she's condescending, as we see here, having just made a fool of the superwoman for the third time. She meets her backstage and says, I told the guys in the front office to kick into your do-gooder charity. Well, back in her private home, Ellen's taken the breastplate of her uniform off, but she is fuming so badly she just can't get over it. And good old husband Stan, who is not nearly as strong as she is always good for giving her a pep talk that it's not really about her, it's about Jeffers. And Jeffers made a fool of herself on public television, or the public arena of television. We later find she's fired as a talk show host, but the cagey Robert Biff McFarland, who owns the station, then brings her back as a news director, where she can continue to be a pain in EnergyGirl's side. This is called This Old Name. As EnergyGirl approached 50 years old, I began to wonder about someone being 50 years old and going by a name with girl in the title. This has long been a matter of debate. a certain comic book of the big guys about a woman who is wonderful and is an Amazon. I can't mention her name because of copyright, but you know who I mean, is one of the very few that actually goes by woman instead of girl. Everybody else uses the word girl, and it seems either sexist or a bit silly. Well, Ellen gets to thinking about this and thinks about changing her name to Energy Woman. And Stan is a little concerned, not because he is a sexist, but because he's just not comfortable with change. And the two of them have it out over the names and what's in a name and what it means for a superhero to call herself girl. And she counters that, why don't you call yourself Cartoon Boy? He says it's different. She says, no, it's not. And then the mail comes, and there's a surprise. So she has to go downtown and get it, and what it turns out to be is a new uniform. It had been time to give her a new uniform anyway, and this was a long way of both having fun with a comic book issue and then introducing the new uniform. Unfortunately, this red uniform did not last very long because not long after I introduced this one of the big guys introduced a very similar one, and I had to take EnergyGirl back to the drawing board and give her a different one. Oh well, that happens. This one is called Kid Cartoonist, in which they're in their home in civilian clothes, and Ellen has been digging through the rafters and found some old comic book magazines. Asked Stan where they came from, Stan explains that when he was a kid in school, he knew this other kid who used to draw his own comic books. Well, I know who that other kid is. It's me in the real world, and yes, that was my character at the time, Super Cat. This is an actual cover. It's great fun to have fictional comic book characters find other characters who in their world are fictional and have fun with that. Multi-leveled fiction. Ellen is laughing and she tells Stan that the poor kid that drew the Super Cat has no idea what it's like to really truly be a genuine superhero. Once again, layered fiction. Okay, sports fans, here we have EnergyGirl on TV. She has been asked to try to burst a steel chain off her chest. Now, you know she's rather ample in that area, but so you'd think it would be easy, but unfortunately it's not. Here we see her giving it all she's got, but the chain does not break. Now, since she's super strong, you would wonder why. She has to tell the television audience, sorry, I just can't do it. Well, the reason why is because of soft tissue displacement, and this enables both Ellen and me to give the reading audience a lesson in physics. But not to disappoint her viewers, she then puts the chains on her biceps and breaks them easily, because that's hard tissue that does not displace. Now, this is a bit over the top. I later redid this drawing where the biceps are more reasonable, but don't have that in this pile. Anyway, this causes Stan and Ellen to get into a lively discussion, as happens when you're a mortal man married to a superwoman, but you love each other. A lot of stuff goes on behind the scenes at home where you talk about stuff. That's another story. This is called The New Car, where that may be the mayor of the fictional town of Fairview where they live, to honor the two superheroes. The city has authorized giving them a new souped-up supercar. Ellen, typically frugal, says, well, why do that? Why not just give us a typical police squad car and save the city money? And Stan says, well, they're trying to do something nice for you. You need to not look a gift horse in the mouth. Well, we see that Ellen thinks it over and this time decides to go along with it, because here they deliver the car, and good sport that she is, she then lifts it overhead and carries it home. And then in our last scene, we see her actually using it in a rescue. I forget what this one is called, but here basically this introduces summer camp, which is the recertification 2-week training heroes must submit to every summer, where they go through exercises and their government handlers watch them to make sure they're still safe to be trusted out in public. We're not told that right away. We see Ellen changing into her uniform and then confronting some terrorist types out there in Fairview in the middle of the night. One of them has some sort of super weapon. He fires at her. Doesn't do a whole lot of good. They seldom do. She then charges him. He tries to fire again at close range. The weapon jams. She takes it away. She's quite aggressive for the character, who normally is gentle, but apparently she's not happy today. Shreds the weapon, knocks the guy down, and is furious. The guy is screaming for mercy. And that's where this one ends, but you then find out the guy is not a terrorist. He's an actor. Well, some people may think actors are pretty terrible, but he's an actor that this is all a stage training exercise, and that explains Ellen's uncharacteristic aggressiveness. It's all part of training. Okay, here's another one. This one is called Caught. There's an emergency downtown. Ellen rushes into an alley to change. She's halfway through changing into her uniform when she suddenly gets the unhappy feeling she's not alone, and we see, uh-oh, there's a drunk guy back in the alley who has just seen her change into EnergyGirl. So now what does she do? She's got to think on her feet, finishes getting the uniform on. Meanwhile, he recognizes her. You're that superhero woman. Uh-oh. With only seconds to act, because there is an emergency elsewhere in progress needing her services, Ellen walks over going, think, Ellen, think fast. And he's going, I've seen you in the newspaper. You're that hero woman. Well, here's where the little fun comes in. Ellen picks up his bottle and says, you got to stop drinking this stuff. You're starting to see things, such as old middle-aged ladies turning into superheroes in front of your eyes. And off she goes to the rescue. Hopefully he'll wake up in the morning and think, nah, couldn't be. And this is a great scene. Ellen cannot fly, but she can leap about 20-25 feet. So we see her rushing out of the alley with her civilian clothes in her bag, and then springing into the air and leaving the bag on a hook high in the air above the alley, where hopefully no one will find it until she gets back. And this is the final page. This is a collection of some of my characters over the years. I've been drawing comic books and other cartoons for almost 50 years now. It's been a great run. Never went into this professionally as far as making a living at it. I do like to eat. But instead, as a hobby, you can see EnergyGirl in there and a lot of the other people, going clear back to the very first one with a name I don't want to tell you because at 9 years old I thought it was cool. Now I think it's Sissy. But there's Super Cat. I mentioned him. He was my childhood character, and onward, upward, EnergyGirl. And underneath the whole pile, that's me. It's always good to end with a comical end panel. So here we have a black and white line drawing of Ellen holding up her uniform, which she has been ironing, and it says, even strong women still sometimes iron clothes. She doesn't have to, but she does sometimes. You know, being a hero is not all bang, pow, zap. It involves the mundane that all of us have to go through, such as ironing a uniform. That's the next comic book, but looks like we've almost got a half an hour in here. I think you've heard me yak enough. But back to my ugly face. Okay, you've seen some of the things that can grow out of the old idea mill once you develop a character and you get cracking with it. The more stories you tell, the more stories come into your mind to tell. It's a great way to spend a Saturday morning. So any of you that are so inclined, you don't have to be where I am. Everybody's an individual, but if you don't start, you'll never get there. So you got an idea, grab some paper, grab a pencil, and let's have a Saturday morning cartoon session. This is Middle Aged Cartoonist, signing off.